So, by way of introduction, again, this is Ben Lancaster. He is the writer and director of The Further Adventures of Walt's Frozen Head, and he's going to Skype with us today and kind of talk about his process for making that and inspiration for making that. So, go ahead, take it away, Ben. Thanks for joining us.
Well, thank you guys for listening to me. I was an MFA student at the University of Central Florida in their entrepreneurial digital cinema program. I think it's now called entrepreneurial digital media. And I was working on a web series that was unrelated to Disney, but I'll be completely honest, one of the reasons that the program was attractive was that it was in Orlando. I had never lived in Orlando before. That seemed exciting. I had always been a lifetime Disney fan. But the impetus for me to make the film was really joking around with a group of friends. And we were just talking about titles of kind of ridiculous movies. And out of my mouth came The Further Adventures of Walt's Frozen Head. So the title came absolutely first before everything else. And, you know, I was working on another project then, really going full steam on that. And just mentioned the joke that I had made with a bunch of my classmates to my wife after I'd gotten home, and she said, "No, that's the movie we have to make. Throw out the other plans, and we're going gung-ho into this one." So that's what we did. I immediately started working on the script, and really realized pretty quickly that there was something here more than just the gimmick, and started developing it out of a lot of research, a lot of kind of armchair psychology, I suppose, into Walt Disney himself, and trying to get to the answer of the question, which is to me the interesting question. Like the idea that Walt froze himself, you know, as a historical matter is pretty speculative. Like it's a ridiculous concept. The idea that he could then be de-thawed is even more scientifically questionable. But the idea that this took hold in the public consciousness, to me, is the most interesting part. So trying to answer that question, what is it about Walt Disney that makes us think he would actually do something like that, was really kind of the driver for the impetus of the film. And then you combine that with the idea that the Disney company really enjoys pushing of you can have whatever you dream for, that your dreams are the most important part of you. Combining those two elements together really gave me kind of the footing that I was interested in doing this movie. So I guess that's where I am now, and a bunch of years later we have a finished film. It's better than good, it's finished. And it's available for people to watch. So that's been the 5-year journey at this point of the movie.
Any questions for now? Ben, can you kind of talk about the process of making it, and then we can get into some more of the intricacies of it?
Okay, sure. So we went about, after the script was developed, which was a fairly lengthy process, which once again involved a lot of research. I think I read 4 or 5 full-length biographies on Walt Disney at the time. And I was actually helped by the fact that my then thesis chair, who, for other reasons we won't talk about, who wound up not being my thesis chair, was a person who had literally taught on the career of Walt Disney for the past 50 years. He was teaching classes when Walt Disney died, if that gives you any indication. He was really helpful in guiding me to the kind of critical research that occurred both right after Walt's death, during Walt's life, and then up until today. That was really essential to developing of the screenplay. So besides biographical details, trying to get into the ideas that Walt was interested in and try and make a movie that would in some ways connect with the ideas that were frequently found in Disney films of the period. So in a lot of ways, this film is kind of a pastiche of of Disney comedies, specifically of the 1950s and 60s, things like The Shaggy Dog, The Absent-Minded Professor, up into like The Happiest Millionaire. We draw a lot of sort of thematic material from that era of the company. And so jumping out of that, I kind of knew the aesthetic I wanted, and luckily that plays in very well to the Magic Kingdom as established. It was built in the 1970s and has a lot of those concepts and design elements of the 1960s and 70s. Obviously, being based on Disneyland, which was built in 55, the park as it exists now didn't open in 71. So you have a lot of the design work being done in that kind of sweet spot of the mid-century when a lot of those Disney movies are being produced. So, that was a very influential design period for both the story and then ultimately the aesthetics that went into it. But then we get into the really interesting part, which is, how we sort of pulled off shooting a movie like this in the Magic Kingdom, which is obviously what everyone wants to hear about it. Not the 2 and 3 weeks of traditional production, but those 4 days that we spent shooting guerrilla style in the Magic Kingdom. How many of you guys actually do production, film production on some level, or hold cameras, run audio? No? Okay, so you guys are all in sort of media studies, that sort of.
Well, this is an honors class that the university offers. So this class
Gotcha.
is about Disney and being
Okay.
a fan of Disney.
Okay, yeah. Sorry, I didn't know if this was. Adjunct to the media program at large, but.
Yeah, no worries.
Okay, well, I'll spare you guys some of the more technical details then, but suffice it to say that the primary thing that we had to do was rehearse. We spent more time on the soundstage rehearsing out exactly what we needed to do than we actually spent in execution. We had a large Google document that was 30 pages long by the time we actually went into shooting that wound up, encompassing about 20 minutes of the script. And that was every shot we needed, the angles we needed them from, the coverage that we needed from those angles, the exact lines. And then it was about making sure that nothing went wrong in so much that we could help. Obviously, things go wrong on shooting, right? But we were lucky to have our 2 actors we were working with in the park have a very strong theater background. And theater actors, as opposed to people who only do film, theater actors know that there are times when you just have to get it right because that's when the audience is there. So there tends to be a little bit more consistency, a little bit more regularity with theater actors than there are with people who have only done film. So we were very lucky to have our 2 people have an extensive theater background. They knew that they had to hit their marks when they hit their marks, and we gave them the rehearsal time needed for that. When we get into the second kind of 2 to 3 weeks of traditional shooting, things are much different. It's a more relaxed pace. We're on set. We're in a more controlled environment. Obviously, we're in Disney World. We have no control over anything. Security guard walks up to us, and we have to pretend like we're just shooting for our own benefit, which only happened, thankfully, twice. And both of those times are reasonably interesting stories. One was outside the security gate as we're going in. We wanted a shot of Peter actually walking through the security. We did not get that shot because we got shut down by security. The second time, which was even a closer call, was us going through the ticketing booths. And our person playing Peter, who's the cast member who takes Walt Disney out, had done some theater work and sort of had been involved in some local theater and recognized our actor. The cast member who was actually checking him in recognized our actor as someone who had done theater work, I should say. I think I said that backwards. But you have your actor walking through, and suddenly he's trying to engage in a conversation with the guy who thinks he should recognize him because he was a stagehand on something that he had done, and starts this long conversation. Looks across, realizes that he's being recorded at the time, and so our actor Daniel tries to play it off as if his girlfriend is recording their first trip to Disney World together. I don't know how much it was bought, but we got everyone in, and luckily we still have the footage, which has made it into the movie. So that did work out for us. Not saying I would want those close calls in the future, but we did get some genuine nervousness on camera. Then it was also, we would fake reversals sometimes. And by reversals, we mean we've got our wide shot facing one direction, and then the reversal is kind of the close-up facing the other direction. So we can move 12 steps backwards from the gate and get a shot that looks like it's Peter walking up to the security gate, for example, without the whole apparatus of the security gate being in that shot, and that's something we can pull off, and we had to several times. And so knowing the limitations of your camera, knowing what the different lenses do to sort of make it all mesh together was really integral. And that was all done with test shooting. We went out there multiple times before the day. Once again, our camera crew, our actors, they knew every square inch. They knew their marks. They knew where they were going to have to stand. We did not leave that sort of thing to chance when it came to actually doing the shooting, because we knew that if we got kicked out the very first shot, we didn't have to move. And so it was absolutely essential that we got through in the way we did, which luckily we did. So that wasn't necessarily an issue. We made it through every shoot that we were hoping for. So we were pretty successful in that. And once again, after we got through that first few shoots where we got shut down on 2 different occasions, we never had any trouble with Disney security or anything along those lines. We also had an interesting time getting actors because we had put out fake casting calls because we knew we didn't at that point want to spill the beans what we were actually doing. But we also needed to get to the point where we had our cast and our crew in place. So crew members we would sort of individually recruit, bring them in, explain what the project was. But cast members, we did an open casting call. And we did an open casting call under a fake name, which was the Florida Project, which at that point was not another independent film that shot in Orlando. Maybe you guys have heard of it. A little bit higher budget than we have, starring William Dafoe and several other name actors. Excellent movie. You should all go see it if you haven't. I think it's on Amazon Prime. But very different movie, and we held this sort of fake casting call. I mean, it was a real casting call, but fake casting call. We auditioned, several hundred people through. We chose our cast, and then we bring them all in for the read-through. We have the scripts laying on the table in front of them, and on top of the scripts, there's an NDA form, with a non-disclosure agreement. I don't know what they thought, because a non-disclosure agreement is not something you're normally expected to sign when you're cast in a low-budget, non-paying indie film. But everybody kind of looked through it, signed it, and then we had the scripts in, and we said, okay, now we've gotten all these forms. Now open up your script. Everybody turns to the front page, sees the real title of the movie, and this group nervous chuckle kind of comes up from the group as people realize what they're actually in for. Luckily, no one backed out. A few people had some small little conditions, like changing a character's name, that sort of thing. But everyone was fully on board with what we were doing. And we were grateful to have all of them, a lot of semi-professional actors in the area, some actual professionals like Daniel and Ron, and then a lot of people who do this sort of on the side. There's actually a lot of filmmaking work that goes on in the Orlando area. It never quite became Hollywood East, which is what they really were trying to do when they built, like MGM Studios and Universal Studios, both built full production suites and were convinced that Orlando was going to be the place to film. Personally, I think there's good reasons why Orlando isn't the place to film, and Atlanta sort of got that instead, mostly having to do with climate and access to locations. So I kind of keep telling Florida people who are like, if only we had the tax incentives. Guys, it's because you have palm trees. Like, Florida can't be anything but Florida. That's sort of the geographical reality. But, anyway, Atlanta's sort of become the filmmaking hub now, since that all fizzled through in the 90s. But there are still a lot of that infrastructure and a lot of those people and a lot of the talent there who are doing things like promotional videos and commercials and trade videos and things like that. So there's a large talent base in Orlando. So if any of you are interested in indie filmmaking, I would strongly suggest you get somewhere where you have a large talent base to draw from. I think it's almost easier to do a project like this in a city that has A, the large talent base, and B, not every single restaurant is being overwhelmed by filmmaking requests like you tend to get in LA and Atlanta and Toronto and places like that do have a high level of filmmaking. There is kind of this perfect medium of getting the talent you need without overwhelming the infrastructure and the facilities, so people are willing to cut you deals. So there is something to be said for that balance. We found a lot of doors open to us because we were a movie, and we were a movie making fun of Disney World, and we were a movie making fun of Disney World in Disney's backyard. We got a lot of locations just kind of on that quirky rebel feel, which was we were very happy with. So yeah, that was the process of of kind of getting through production. We wound up running 2 Kickstarters for the movie, and that was really based on a pretty strong social media platform. I think you'd be hard pressed to find a film our size that has more social media engagement than ours does. You'll obviously find larger films that have stronger social media presences. I think we're getting very close to about 10,000 active followers across our 2 platforms, Facebook and Twitter, which is nothing to sneeze at this point. It is a fan base that we've built even since before we announced. I started the viral Twitter account, which is @WaltzFrozenHead, before we had announced, and I really knew that being integrated into the Disney fan community was something that was going to be absolutely essential for us. We had to draw on the support of the Disney fan community, and in order to do that, we had to prove that these are our people, essentially. So it was very early on when I went through the process of setting up that Twitter account and starting to interact with the sort of community that's known as Diz Twitter or theme park Twitter or whatever. We knew that was going to be essential, and so we made it a very high priority. So we had several thousand followers at the point we announced our Kickstarter. There's no way our first Kickstarter would have been successful without those several thousand followers. A lot of people think that you throw up a Kickstarter and you have a good enough video and you can get the support. That might be true, but that number is really shrinking. So when people are looking at crowdfunding today, you need that pre-established fan base before you do anything of scale. And the bigger your pre-establishing fan base, obviously, the better it is for you. So I would say start those social media accounts early, be very active on them, and prove yourself to the community that you're expecting to get funding from. Because that's for better or for worse, that's the way you got to work in this world at this point. So I guess any other sort of production stuff you'd guys like me to talk about? I mean, I can go through more detailed production notes. Unless you'd prefer me to talk about like script development. I mean, what would you guys like? What part would you guys be most interested in hearing about? I suppose.
Who was on your fundraising team? Like, was it just like you got like?
Sorry, I can see your mouth moving. I can't hear you.
Who was on like your fundraising team? Like, was it like you guys, like the main people working on the project, or did you have to bring in more people to help you fundraise, or how did that work? Like, I know you said you had a Kickstarter, but like, who was that? Just experience that you knew that from, or did you bring somebody in?
So on the fundraising side, I think I got it. I still couldn't quite make out everything. On the fundraising side, we did not bring outside consultants in on fundraising. We did it all ourselves. We had our production crew and our cast in place, which I think was absolutely essential. So when we announced with every actor but Walt and our entire production crew in place, so we were able to say, like, here are the bios of the people who are making this movie, which I think instills trust, instills that this is going to be some project. Now, granted, our bios were a lot of people who had not made a feature film before. Personally, I've made 2 feature films. I don't allow people to watch them because they were great learning experiences. I'll put it that way. There are parts that I'm very proud of in them. But first of all, I do actually think that there's this old Hollywood mindset of like your first feature film is going to be a $5 million budget, and you're going to hire professional TV actors and that sort of thing. I think that's breaking down based on new media. I hope it's breaking down based on new media. Prominent film schools are still kind of trying to keep it alive, as people are doing $500,000 short, 10-minute shorts as their feature films, unfortunately. Where was I going with this? Yeah, fundraising. So we got a lot of non-institutional support from UCF in that we got to use their equipment, we got to use some of their networking and that sort of thing. And then it came time to actually release our fundraising. We did not get featured in the school paper, which was weird because we got featured in the Orlando Sentinel, which is like the regional paper for the area. But for some reason, the institution of UCF was more wary of the production. Like, they refused to send out official press releases for us, which was really weird. And like my thesis advisor was like, I tried talking to this guy, and he was just intractable on this. Very odd that they had a level of reticence towards the project on an institutional level. But we got through with what we did without kind of that level of support. And we also had the film department behind us. So we got the departmental resources. Obviously, we needed that for the cameras and such. As part of the MFA project, it wasn't expected that they would turn us down on that after we got approved by all the professors. But fundraising was us going out on a limb and talking to individuals. Some of the fundraising that come in was people I'd kind of known personally, like over the course of years, and I'm sure there was a little of that, like the girl who played Molly, her parents gave us like a few $100. Like, okay, fantastic, that's great. They're so thrilled their daughter's at a movie. Like, that's great. That kind of fundraising is just gonna be part of it, but you can't count on that to push you over the edge, right? In order to get outside fundraising, you have to establish yourself as the people who are going to make something that's going to really talk to that specific community. And based on the response that we've gotten over the last few days, I think we were very successful in that. I actually, before I went to UCF to get my MFA, I actually taught at a small university called Taylor. And when I was teaching through media study, they assigned me, yeah, hey, you're teaching media studies. And I'm like, fine. So I'm a chapter ahead in the textbook before the week that I'm teaching the topic. But we got to a chapter called Uses and Gratifications, which was a theory that I think was developed in like the post-war era by a researcher named Herta Herzog. And she was specifically looking at housewives who were really into, at that point, was like radio soap operas. Okay, so you guys know what you know the kind of thing, right? Like, imagine, I think Guiding Light was actually started on the radio and then moved over to television. So that kind of quality, let's say not the highest production quality, probably not the greatest scripts, but they have very loyal fan bases, specifically among, housewives who are in the post-war period. They're at home all day, and they will frequently tune into their, whatever. Okay, so anyway, that's all besides the point. The theory is that people care a lot less about quality than they do the fact that this particular piece of media speaks specifically to them. That this is reaching into some itch that they have that needs to be scratched. And so I think that explains a lot of the reaction I'm getting. The phrase I hear over and over is, you made a movie for me. And, I think there's something very powerful in that it's going to attract a very small and very loyal fan base. If you can pull off people feeling like you made a movie for them. I have this thing free up on YouTube, and people said, when's the Blu-ray coming out? I'm like, buddy, you can watch it for free. You're trying to just give me money. You can watch it for free. And then, no, I want the Blu-ray for my shelf. Okay. So now I'm trying to figure out how we're doing a limited Blu-ray run. which I honestly I was not expecting. So we have built through this process a small but very loyal fan base, which is interesting, but really I think fits into that idea of uses and gratifications, that the people choose their choice of media not because it's the highest technical quality, not because it has the best written script, but in some ways because it fits this very niche need that they may not have even known they had. And if they're a fan of Disney theme parks and a fan of Walt, but kind of like seeing the company tweaked, like now there's a piece of media that is super hyper focused on this need that they may not have known they have. And so a lot of people try and make their indie films reach a very broad base. And if you're making a quote-unquote indie film, you know the kind I mean, right? Like small factory town to people who kind of talk in mumblecore, that sort of movie. There is obviously a fan base for that genre, but if you're trying to break out of that genre that is quote-unquote indie movie, you need to find the fan base you're making that for, and they need to be there, and they need to be there in enough numbers to support you, and then you've got to double down on making that movie for them. People have mentioned specific lines they loved in the movie, and for some reason the one that always comes up is a joke about Paul Pressler. Now, Paul Pressler is like so many levels of references to like deep cut here. Did any of you know who Paul Pressler is? Yeah, didn't expect it. I want to say he was the vice president of Disney Parks during the 90s and like had this big push. He was the one who was like, you know what we need to do? We need to make people exit through a gift shop. That was Paul Pressler. Like he invented that, or at least was strongly pushing that. There's a joke about Paul Pressler in the movie. People have told me, I love the Paul Pressler joke. Like it's a throwaway joke. But I think what we did successfully is we found that very specific audience and we made the movie specifically for them. Thus far, that has not translated into mainstream success. We just being completely realistic, we did not get the film festival reaction we were hoping for. I was hoping that we would get into a larger film festival. It didn't happen. We got into a good number of decent mid-range film festivals. We did not get into South by Southwest. We did not get into LA Film Fest, anything like that. I was hoping. I think unless you're making a film that's so targeted towards film festival programmers, identifying film festival programmers as your core demographic, it's getting harder and harder for a film our size to get in. Everything I've heard, I talked to the programming director at, I think, the South Dakota Film Festival, and he told me, like, we're getting 3 times as many submissions, and they're all fantastic. Partially because filmmaking's gotten easier, right? A lot of those institutional walls have dropped, and a lot of people are reacting to that 5 years late. And so they're getting a lot more feature film submissions. They're getting a lot more short film submissions as well. Everyone's submission rates are up. This number of spots hasn't increased. And quite honestly, the public appetite has probably decreased because there's more out there. So that's the reality on the film festival side. On the streaming side, if you don't need to make your money back right away, there's a lot of opportunity. We're rounding on 15,000 views in the last few days. Had we thrown it up essentially and sold it for $10, I don't think we'd be reaching that. I put up a tip jar at the end. We've gotten quite a few more people than I expected to give us $5. These are people who are not under any, in my mind, I certainly wouldn't be under any moral obligation to donate. There's a lot of people who wanted to give us money because, we made something for them. And I think that's a very powerful force for a lot of people. When you feel like you have been directly addressed and someone has reached out in a very specific way and made something for you, you respond so positively towards it that you tend to overlook some of the technical flaws. And trust me, this film has many technical flaws that we can get into. Sound editing, let's start there. But Yeah, no, we do have, we were made on the coffee budget of a major motion picture. And so we don't have the polished technical that I wish we had. I think we're a lot closer than we would have been having made the film in any other era. We couldn't have made the film 5 years before we did, honestly, and had the product come out looking nearly as good as it did. People give Escape from Tomorrow some flack, I should say, for shooting in black and white, and sometimes the image is a little blown out and things like that. They were shooting with the technology they had at the time. We were shooting with the technology we had at the time. Realistically, the improvement in how good the film looks is purely based on technology, because they spent a lot more money in post-production processing than we had. And maybe part of that was an artistic choice, but realistically, I think they were bound by the technology they had at their fingertips. So yeah, that was kind of the reaction that we've gotten so far from the Disney fan community. It's been terrific. I'm hoping that continues to be terrific. It would be great if more platforms out there were really invested in people making sort of longer scale projects. Right now you have a growing division between Amazon and iTunes, which used to have a lot of indie films on them and now are kind of cutting back both in the amount they're paying their creators and in their willingness to accept things. And then on the other platform, you've got YouTube, which is really only interested in monetizing channels, not so much interested in monetizing specific products. So we have finally, now that we've released everything, we've finally become eligible for monetized YouTube account. I'm going to submit the application soon, but that takes a month to get through. And if you're making a video a week and you have kind of a slow burn of subscribers, that's something you can wait a month on. We're dropping a major project. We're not going to see it monetized with any ad revenue whatsoever and realistically have it amount to anything because in a month, hey, we're not going to be hot anymore. I recognize that we're going to have a surge. We had a surge this weekend. Hopefully that's going to continue for the next 2 weeks, and then we're going to sort of have a long tail. Unless some other event happens and some larger channel picks it up, and people start watching it again for some other reason, we're going to have a long tail of viewership. Hopefully that means a long tail of revenue. Hopefully we can come out with some things like that. Yep.
Why not make smaller videos and continue to release them? Why not make a behind the scenes thing? You guys not have that, or is it just not
I'm sorry. I'm gonna go to headphones. I think that might be why I can't hear. Let me plug this in real quick. I'll try that again.
All right. So why wouldn't you have smaller videos to keep releasing on the channel? Is it specifically a channel for the movie, or could you put up behind the scenes footage, just a 2-minute clip, just for your fan base?
I am so sorry. Can someone sitting closer to the mic repeat that? I think that's the issue.
Why don't you post shorter videos, behind the scene videos, on the channel as well as the movie?
Okay. That's a very good question. The answer is eventually we're going to. The trouble that we had is behind the scenes videos take a lot of work. We do not have the behind the scenes assets to create a ton of videos out of this. We've got a lot of still photography people took, and I don't know how much interest there is in for little documentaries. On my last film, we did that. We got so little viewership. So if you have somebody who's interested in making behind the scenes videos for you, by all means, let them have free reign. Throw them up there, do consistent releases, get people excited. That is a fantastic idea. The reality was, when I'm trying to make the movie, I can't also be focused on shepherding someone through the behind the scenes process. So I wish we had done more of that,
But looking back on it, like everyone who had any level of talent, we were recruiting to be part of the crew for the regular movie. It was going to be hard for us to also get that behind the scenes person to be shooting. Because what you want is like the people, like the actors lounging around on set. They turn to the camera. They tell a little bit about what they're doing that day. That's what people want, right? So when you're a Hollywood film, you're going to spend $30,000 on your behind the scenes crew going around getting those little things and editing them together in a feature for the DVD. We should have done that. Honestly, we should have. And it was an issue of resources and not wanting to spend them there. Now, what I will say was, if I had the opportunity to go back in time and do it again, I would not be making a feature film. I would be making a web series that took place over 5 episodes. That's realistically, and if I had the opportunity to do a sequel or something like that, I'd be looking at that as a format instead of the single 80-minute feature film. Here it is in its entirety. I think that would have made a lot more sense. I think we would have gotten the viewership up, and we would have been able to have this sort of long release of different episodes that sort of came out. But that's also stepping away from the fact that you're not going to get picked up at LA Film Fest, which is sort of what we were hoping for, and what didn't wind up happening. You get picked up there, you get a traditional distribution deal, you get some money. You try and start this YouTube channel. You hope that you get enough subscribers and patrons and that sort of thing. It's a very different financial setup. Part of my entrepreneurial digital degree was not just the filmmaking side of it, but also the budget breakdowns and the hopefully return on investment. I doubt we'll see a return on investment, but there is sort of that still slim possibility that we get enough patrons or we get enough whatever. I'm actually looking at creating some certainly cheaper forms of media that we now use this channel that has the monetization and the subscribers already set up to kind of make another series that's sort of related to the Disney parks, but not quite really. It's sort of a podcast with some imagery so we can release it on YouTube. We'll see if that goes anywhere. But if we can get a consistent viewership on that, maybe that will be what the film has sort of been leading to. I don't have a great answer except to say that your primary media is going to be where your money is. You're going to be where your viewerships are. Like, then you're slicing the people who are interested in behind the scenes stuff off. And if I were starting it over, I'd slice that bit of primary media up into as many parts as I realistically can and make it much more YouTube friendly. But that's also the benefit of knowledge. If you think you can get into LA Film Festival, go for LA Film Festival, or South by Southwest, or Sundance, or Raindance, or fill in your film festival of choice.
So, Ben, that kind of brings up an interesting question for me. You said you have things in the works or planned. Do you have any other like Disney related things that you're going to put on the channel? Or I know that the movie kind of ended with spoil it for everybody, but the way the movie ended, it kind of seemed like there could be some future there. Are there any plans for continuing things?
So the project I'm working on now, and it's still in earlier-ish stages of development, is I want to do a fictional podcast series that has some additional visual elements that takes place in the city of Epcot, as if it had, in an alternate timeline, as if it had been built. And it's the first murder in Epcot. That's kind of the jumping off point. So you have this sort of highly technological city that's a little bit fascist, a little bit controlling of its citizens. That's kind of the jumping off point. It takes place in modernish day, but like this alternative timeline where technology developed very differently. So it's Disney related. It's going to have a lot of sort of references to classic Epcot, but it's not going to be necessarily tied to the Walt's Frozen Head story. The other thing I've looked at is started talking about and developing is a guide to Walt Disney World as if it was written by Walt's Frozen Head. That would obviously be published as a book. It would be something that we could once again kickstart and then get published and then mail out and then hopefully make some money off of that kind of spins out of the movie. We'll see if there's interest there. The book obviously, both projects take time and effort, and but less resources than shooting a feature film. That's what I'm looking for now. Like, I'm willing to put in the time, I'm willing to put in the effort. We spent a lot of money and time and effort on the movie, and we're hoping to find ways to create media that once again scratches those itches without the full-on production cost of a feature film. We'll see if that's possible, if that's something we can find a good balance on or not.
So with the channel, are you thinking that everything you were to post on that channel should in some way be Disney related to get after the Disney fandom that's already there? Or do you think posting other things non-Disney related, how do you think that would work?
I think we have to. I think people have subscribed for a specific reason, and I think we need to give them that reason. So we might go in a slight different direction with that channel, but I think if I start something else completely from scratch, we gotta go through the process again of getting that social media feed up, getting that going. There might be a little cross-pollination here and there, but I'm not gonna dump a completely separate project onto that channel just because it's popular. Okay. To me, that channel has identified an audience. I think of it as a TV channel. Like, we can do a different series. Let me rephrase that, because TV channel can have whatever on it, like in this day and age. I think of it as a niche cable channel, like Fox Sports 8. You can have something sportsy, sort of sportsy, people talking about sportsy, actual sports. You can't have, cooking show. Like, there are definitely things that don't belong on that channel. And to me, it's got to touch the Disney fandom in some way. I'd love to find other things, but the channel is going to exist as if I do anything Disney related. Now, personally, I'd love to do things that are non-Disney related too. I do have other interests, but look, I've got a fan base here, and if I can make things to please that fan base, and I can make that sort of worth my time in both exposure and hopefully some sort of financial remuneration, hey, that's great. I'd love to double down on that rather than starting something else from scratch, because that starting from scratch takes a lot of time and a lot of effort. And if I've got something here that I can do, I'd love to participate in that.
Okay.
So,
I had another question about the cast. So, Ron Schneider, he actually Skyped with our class last year about his time at Disney. Can you talk a little bit about how, getting him on the movie, working with him, and then how you shot his scene, since he is the talking head?
Right.
Did he have to be in the Magic Kingdom and things like that?
Oh no, we had shot the entirety of the film prior to bringing Ron on.
Okay.
So when we reached out to him, we had already had the entire cut of the movie cut together with someone off stage saying his lines, basically. So he was able to look at the script, and he was able to look at the, obviously no VFX, not sound corrected or whatever, but the cut of the movie. Excuse me. And we reached out to him, and I kind of, it was one of those things I kind of kept in my back pocket. We actually reached out to a few other people, sort of, I don't want to say former celebrities, because that sounds mean, but people who maybe are less active in their careers now than they had been in the past. We got some interest. We got some quotes that were just too high for us realistically to be able to raise on Kickstarter. And then we moved forward with reaching out to Ron. And Ron's local, so it made a lot of parts of it easier. He's not working for the company anymore, which obviously made parts of it easier. And he was thrilled to be a part of it, which was fantastic for us. We were unsure, because creating the walk-around character of Dreamfinder was obviously the Choose accomplishment. That doesn't mean he's necessarily going to be the best actor for Walt. But when he submitted his video audition for us, we were all blown away. We thought, this is absolutely fantastic. when can you start? So we shot 3 days on a soundstage with him in a wheelie chair, a wheelie office chair, because we realized it was much easier to move Ron than it was to move the camera. So the camera just stayed still. It would go up and down to match the height, and then we would move the Ron on the angle. And then we had a tennis ball on a light pole that we put to establish his eye line. And it was me, the cinematographer for those shoots, and the visual effects artist huddled around a computer trying to guesstimate the right angles, because we didn't have notes on that, unfortunately, which was probably, once again, an oversight of production that we wish we would have fixed. Yeah, so it was that for 3 days on a soundstage, and then our VFX artist pulled everything in to the and resized and matted and put the head onto the box, which had a little green screen on it. So that was the process, and it took him a long time. It took me a lot of coaxing of him, because he is doing this out of the goodness of his heart and a portion of the proceeds. Because we couldn't pay anyone, I should say, a few people got cash up front. Our composer and a few other people who kind of have technical skills we knew we needed to bring in, and just we had to pay for them. So a few people got cash up front, but most of the people who were working on this, above the line people, got a chunk of the movie. That's what we sort of felt was a fair remuneration for the work they did. We'll see if any of us see any of that, because we have a few bills to pay back first. I wish we had gotten that sort of traditional distribution deal, which would have guaranteed us a lot more income. But the reality is that we are being seen by a lot of people at this point, and I hope that's good for everyone who was involved. With, once again, the fact that most of the people who are involved are kind of in the early parts of their career, Ron being the exception, hoping that this becomes a breakout hit for us.
Yeah. Any other questions? All right. Well, thank you very much, Ben, for joining us.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you for your time. And as I said, I really enjoyed it. It's still up on YouTube. Everyone has the link. It is at the same link, right?
Yes, same link.
So everyone has that, and we'll leave here with Ben, but we'll talk more about it next week as well. So thanks a lot, Ben.
Thank you. Thank you guys for having me.
Have a good rest of the day.
All right, you too. Bye.
Bye.